Welcome, everyone. I'm Nichol Bradford. I'm a core advisor to BrainMind, and I'm here with Dr. Ed Boyden, the YEVA 10 professor in neurotechnology. And we just finished hearing a fantastic overview of Ed's new work. So Ed, tell us what the talk was about that you just gave.
Sure. Well, for the last couple of decades, I guess, I've been directing a group at MIT that's working on tools to map and repair the brain. And the tools have gotten pretty good. We've shared them with thousands of people to help try to solve different problems, ranging from blindness to Alzheimer's disease. But increasingly, I've been wondering, can we use these tools to really understand the brain very deeply? And so today, I talked about our plan to combine our tools for mapping the brain and controlling the brain to build very accurate computer simulations of the brain. Could you simulate actual decisions, actual emotions in computer software? And then you could really look under the hood and see what's happening in the brain during these extremely complicated processes.
And out of that, what do you most want people to know? What do you most want them to understand about this new trailblazing work?
Well, this work is just at the beginning, and maybe the thing that's most relevant to say is just how little we know about how the brain works. We cannot fully explain any sensation or thought or feeling or action. The brain is so complicated. Within a cubic millimeter of the brain, you'll have 100,000 cells with 1 billion connections. And so now, it looks like the technologies that we and our collaborators and colleagues have been building might allow us to really take a look at that dense network and to control it. And that might allow us to build these models. But who knows what surprises await? AI is a very hot field right now. But that's just a hint at what might be possible if we understood how the brain worked at its most fundamental levels.
And if you had more time during your presentation, if you'd had another 20 minutes or an hour, what would you have included that you did not?
Well, in the talk, I started by talking about our tools for controlling the brain, optogenetics, and mapping the brain, this method for using basically baby diaper materials to make the brain physically bigger. And then I jumped right to our goal of combining these tools to get the kind of data that would allow you to model the brain at its most fundamental levels. But I didn't get to talk about, because of time constraints, about the impact this is having on the clinic. So tools that our group developed or that our group helped others develop with our technology are now showing promise in human trials for blindness, for Alzheimer's disease, and more. And so it's very exciting to see the impact that might be around the corner for real human patients.
That's so exciting. What would be the thing for a scientist or another researcher or a student coming up or a politician? Like, what can they do to support this work?
Well, I think in brain science, it's hard to imagine the complexity of what we're dealing with. The density of the brain, the high-speed operation of the brain, the technologies that we and others have been building have been very, very helpful in terms of understanding more about the brain. But I think we can make a lot of progress and still have a long way to go. And I think one of the things that I would probably most want to emphasize is just sustainability, that this is a project for the long haul, understanding something as profound as the brain. I mean, after all, it makes us do what we do and think what we think and feel what we feel. And whether you're interested in economics or politics or anything, all those things are driven by our brains and what our brains do. I think keeping up enthusiasm for the long haul is important because we made a lot of progress, but it's also showed us just how long we have to go as well, given the immense complexity of what it is in our heads that makes us who we are.
So patience and ongoing funding of this important work that's going to take some time to get there.
Well, and importantly, this idea of going for the ground truth, I think, has really taken hold, right? We can try to do very fast projects, but if we're not understanding the fundamentals, a lot of these projects are going to fail, right? And I switched into neuroscience from engineering 25 years ago. And in those 25 years, we haven't cured anything, right, in the brain. And our treatments, we have some treatments that are helping, but they're fairly small in number. And so I think that just shows how hard this problem of the brain is and how we have to really not lose our energy and focus.
One of the things that I noticed in your final slide was just the number of people who have been working towards this point. Mm-hmm. How do you see collaboration in this space for this goal?
So two things have become very clear about collaboration. One is that the fundamental sciences, chemistry, computer science, mathematics, and so forth, have a lot to offer the brain. In some ways, you could think of the brain as a computer system that runs on chemistry according to the laws of physics. So if we can bring fundamental science from all directions into brain science, I think that's going to help a lot with the building of tools and the applying of tools to the brain. But maybe even more from a societal and disciplinary way of thinking, people love to talk about interdisciplinary science these days, right? Combining fields. Brain science might be the first omni-disciplinary science, right? Where every single discipline, material science, every kind of engineering, every kind of physics and chemical branch could have something to offer.
Wow, that's truly exciting. One of the things that you mentioned earlier when we were talking was just the role of AI in making some of this new work possible, and that is a very hot topic these days. Everyone's very curious about how AI affects everything. Specifically, how can AI or how will AI support this new direction?
Well, I think if you look at the history of science, there are two moments in each field that I think everybody would agree are the turning points. Of course, there's lots of other revolutions that are needed, but if you look at physics, for example, and let's just talk about physics on the surface of the Earth, quantum mechanics was one of the most fundamental descriptions of physics that applies. And then arguably the invention that made it practical and deployable into everyday life was the microchip, right? So microchips run on principles of quantum mechanics, but once the microchip exists, you can be a college dropout and start Apple, Facebook, or Microsoft, right? Literally all three were started by college dropouts, right? So I don't think that's a coincidence. There's a moment of understanding and a moment of practicality. Now, what is it like for the brain? Well, I think the moment of understanding is indeed helped by having a list of the parts of the brain and how they work together. But how do you make that practical? There are thousands of genes in the human genome. There are thousands of cells types in the brain, and the wiring is daunting and overwhelming. And so you need AI, machine learning, and computer science more generally to make sense of it. And so if I think about sort of, what is the quantum mechanics moment for the brain and what is that microchip moment for the brain, I think getting the list of the parts and how they work together, the mechanistic neuroscience is really key to the understanding, but then how do you make use of that information? How do you turn that set of data and those insights into actionable, tasks that result in concrete outcomes for everyday improvement of the human condition? And I think that's going to require computer science and AI and machine learning to take that vast amount of complex data and extract the most important actionable path.
And you mentioned having patience and enthusiasm over the long term. What, if you had to guess, do you think will be the timeline to actually get to a model of the brain?
Mm-hmm. Well, the trick is to be, sort of impatient in a patient way. And we don't want to wait any longer than we have to, right? But I think that there's a strategic impatience that one can apply. So, do we do pure basic science that's driven by curiosity? Or do we do translational work that can help patients, right? That's the old dichotomy that you often hear about when people talk about scientific approaches. But I would vote for a third path where we can build tools to accelerate our ground truth understanding of complexity, and then, based upon that deep knowledge, build things that are translational and deployable and so forth. Pretending the problem is simple does not make it simple, but we can up our game by building the tools that make the complexity tractable. And so when we talk about patience and impatience and how we go about thinking about things, I think that's sort of an important meta principle. So in terms of the original question you asked about the timeline, I think that there are both things that are going to go faster than we think and things that are going to go slower than we think. So one thing that's going to go faster than we think is people are pouring talent into brain technology, new imaging tools, new tools for stimulating the brain. At BrainMind here, we're hearing lots about different kinds of technology, for example. And so that capability, I think, is going to rapidly improve in the coming few years. I think, though, that there's still going to be lots of unknowns that pop up with the application of the tools. People are going to find surprising things that no theory or hypothesis could have pointed to. And if you look at the history of biology, a lot of the big discoveries were serendipity, right? CRISPR was found in yogurt, right? That was not a plan to edit the genome when they were studying yogurt. It was a beautiful set of serendipitous events that were then facilitated by extreme scientific insight. But it wasn't like, a plan from beginning to end, right? And I think that's going to continue to be the flavor of our biggest discoveries and innovations, is that you have to make the path safe for serendipity.
Oh, I love that. Make the path safe for serendipity. Well, one of the things about BrainMind is that we also try to make the path safe for serendipity here and to create opportunities to create luck by bringing together funders and scientists and other people who are passionate about the space. If you were speaking to a scientist about why they should attend BrainMind, what the the real value here is for someone who is exploring the brain scientifically, what would you say to them?
Well, I'm a big believer in serendipity, not as some kind of metaphysical force, but as a good strategy. And I think that one way to engineer your luck or increase your serendipity is to go and talk to people and learn about things that you might not have thought to go after. And in my own life, a lot of our group's discoveries and inventions have been driven with a healthy dose of serendipity. And so, yeah, meeting people from a field that you might not have thought about, or thinking about a problem from a totally different angle, or switching your way of approaching the problem. Is it a company versus an academic project? Is it a nonprofit versus something that should be done philanthropically in another way? These are the kinds of things that I think BrainMind really helps with the thinking about, not just crossing the disciplines, but coming up with new approaches to the problem overall.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Great, thank you.